I guess everybody's meeting Chi-Chi today.
Yeah. He's a handsome boy.
Now that everybody's heard about the wedding debacle.
Yeah, I think we left off at dinner, right? That's where we left off.
No, we talked through the dinner, but I think today we should probably talk about like blending our families and kind of the challenges that we face as step parents.
Yes. Because obviously, if we want to talk about that, we got to start from the beginning, right? And I just remember like the first time I ever met, not met Carly, but the first time that I remember going to your house originally.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting on the couch and like,
Chi-Chi, you gotta go, buddy.
The door was just like cracked. I think we might need to set this over. Chi-Chi, great. Great.
He's gone.
Okay. So let's start.
Should we start over? No, just keep it going. Okay. Yeah, I think, and I don't want to speak too much for Carly because I do want to interview her. We're just kind of trying to like work out the logistics of the interviews with the kids, right? But, for her, it had just been her and I since she was 3.
Right.
And here she is 10 and you're in the picture. Kiara and me are in the picture. And then, oh, by the way, we're also pregnant. You're getting another sister.
Yeah, no. That's what I'm saying. Because I remember that, like, it was, like I was saying earlier, like, just, like, from, like, my perspective of the sense of that, like, I remember just sitting there and just seeing her. And she was just, like, staring at me. But then, like, I remember, like, I could feel it that it's, like, I think it almost felt like as if, like, she knew her life was going to change. And it was just obviously something that she wasn't. It's a lot for a kid at that age, right? And I mean, like, we've talked a lot about it now, and exactly. And then all of a sudden, like, we're together, we're getting married, you're moving out.
Yeah.
She has 2 sisters that she's getting right off the bat, and then we're pregnant, and her father and stepmother
got pregnant not too long after that.
Not too long after that, and then, oh hey. We're moving you to Lynn, and it's just like this whirlwind.
Right, because don't forget, too, we lived down the stairs from my parents.
And Brady.
Yeah. So her whole life, I mean, I mentioned in one of the previous episodes, like, Brady's still to this day like her little brother, but back then they were always together.
Big time.
I mean, if you saw me and Carly, you saw Brady, too.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. I remember that was probably one of the first times that we kind of had that dry run at the school in the playground.
Yeah.
When it was just kind of like, it was just kind of one of those things, let's kind of see what happens. It wasn't something that we planned. It was just kind of something that just happened organically. And then, like, while the kids were kind of playing, and I remember that Mia was racing you at that point. And I'm pretty sure you smoked me too. I was like...
I was in really good shape.
Yeah, you were fast.
I even beat Brady, which I definitely couldn't do now. But at that point, he was like 5. So. And I had to really work at it.
Yeah, the kid had wheels.
Yeah.
He still does.
But yeah, so that was kind of like... That day at the playground was when we had kind of like our first family outing. We weren't married or anything yet, but we went out together with the kids. We went to Dairy Maid in Everett.
Yes. And that was kind of exactly that. It was kind of like, oh, it was like that slow introduction.
Yeah.
It was of this new dynamic.
Right. And that was a year into us meeting each other. Like, we didn't introduce the kids, or you didn't introduce me to your kids until then, really.
I think it was like at that point that we knew we were going to get married. Mm-hmm. We knew that. And like I said before in a previous episode, that I always promise my kids, you're never going to meet anybody who I'm not going to marry. Like, the only person you're ever going to meet, I was not going to bring people in and out of their lives. And so for them to actually meet you, that's kind of in their minds, oh my God, like, my dad's going to marry her, or like my dad's going to move on. And I think for a certain time, I think they knew that and they kind of handled things a little bit differently at that time too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that was good. We had like a good first meeting. And I mean, really for me with Kiara and Mia, like they kind of took to me right away. I never really had any issues with them kind of like accepting me into their life.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it was like one of those things that I remember. I didn't exactly have that feeling when it came when it was me and Carly in the beginning. Like her and I have had conversations about that because obviously then it kind of goes into the next part of like loyalty, like right, like in how like the kids just feel like this loyalty to their parent, and they always feel like a betrayal if they accept somebody else. And I remember that I had like a serious talk with Carl's, basically saying to her like, hey kiddo, like, I'm not here to replace your dad. Like you have a father and he's a great father. Like, I'm not here. I'm just looking to be somebody that's going to add to your life and,
right.
and be someone additional that you can lean on and things like that. And I think it was after her and I had that conversation that she kind of knew, like, I'm not here to like, I don't want you to call me dad. Like you have a dad. Like he reserves that right. Like, I'm just somebody in your life that, a bonus dad, right? It's just one of those things, or like all those different names that people gotta say. Like,
you guys have come so far. Like, oh my God, you guys get along so well.
What's crazy is that like me and Carl's are probably more alike.
Yeah.
I probably have more in common with her than I do with anybody else in the house.
Yeah.
And like her and I see eye to eye on so many different things. Like, and like it's just so different. Like I've had like tons of late night talks with Carl's and
right, like deep convos
and stuff like that. Her and I are always good for the good deep convo.
Yeah.
And
but I think like it's so interesting, right? Because one of the things that you really struggled with at first when Carly and I moved in, my custody schedule with her was that I had her for most of the week. She would go to John and Meg's on Thursday nights, and then we would get her back Sunday. So we had her most of the time. And at that time, we only had Kiara and Mia on the weekends. So I remember you feeling like, oh, it's going to feel really weird to me to have, essentially somebody else's kid the majority of the time, and then only have my kids less than that.
Right. And so I think it's like for me, when I remember that part, it's basically it was a couple different things, right? I hated the fact that the kids were like two ships in a night. Like they just kind of went by each other.
Yeah, they didn't really see each other much.
They didn't see each other much other than like what school was, but they didn't have like that ability to kind of really
like build that sister relationship.
Right. Like it was that it bothered me. And then exactly like it did stink because I want all my kids together and stuff like that. But now thinking about it, like in you saying it right now, I think it's probably something what needed to happen because it only helped me and Carly's relationship because I was able to have so much one-on-one with her.
Yeah.
And like,
you would take her grocery shopping, right? Yeah.
Like her and I were talking about it the other day because when we went to the mall, and we were right by like a frozen yogurt place.
Oh yeah,
and I remember that. And then like I'm like, Carlos, don't tell your mom that we're gonna go because we stopped before dinner and stuff like that. And then she's like, oh my God, she's calling me. And I'm like, don't answer it. Like, and then like she would answer like, yeah. She's like, why are you at Ardsley? I'm like, how the hell she know? I'm like, oh, she had your location. Like it was like, and then like it was just always funny. And then like also it was awesome too because like we used to go to like these Mexican restaurants, and so like I started like exposing her to like different like dishes and stuff like that. Like she had like ceviche. She's trying this. She's like, oh my God, it's so good. And then like it was just so awesome because it was just kind of experiencing something brand new, and it was establishing a different kind of relationship, and it was just something that was just so awesome. And but yeah, it was something that was particularly tough. I remember that.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting now because the opposite is true. Yes. We have Kiara and Mia the majority of the time, and because Carly goes to school about a half hour away from where we live, it's tough for her to want to wake up at, 6:10 in the morning and have one of us drive her.
But it's
and
also
stuff
like
that.
the anxiety, because like we tried it before, and it's either you're gonna get there an hour early or you're gonna get there like a half hour late, just because of the way how the traffic is driving.
Yeah, if you're from Boston, we're talking about driving on 93 South. So
yeah, exactly that. And it's just like we go from like leaving so super early, and then like I'm getting there early, but then there's just sometimes of you just never know, because we're going 495 to 93 and all that different stuff like that. So it's not fair to her either to have to drive with that to have that anxiety and things like that. And that's how she's starting off her day, right? Like
exactly, and you just don't want to start your day like that.
No.
So I totally get it, but it is something that's difficult for me as a mom because, she's not here. Oh, she's here on the weekends,
she's
vacations,
she's
stuff like that.
Too,
yeah, she's my baby. I want all my kids together, of course. That's just realistically not our life. But it is hard if we go out and do something and one of the kids isn't there. I think that's like a big struggle for me, even with Kiara and Mia too. Like, if they do go to their moms or whatever and we're going out to all do something together as a family, but one of our members is missing,
Right. Oh, right. I think the babies do miss that a lot. And I know like specifically with Camila, I think Camila's probably the one that probably feels it a lot more than Selena does.
Yeah, for sure.
Where like she'll actively cry out, be like, "Oh, I just miss Car, or I miss Rara and stuff like that. I miss Mia," like, and that's where it gets like so super tough. But then it's just so funny because like whenever they are here, like it's like typical sisters. Like she's just like, yeah. It's just so funny how it is. She's like, "Oh, I miss you, but like get away from me." It's like
what'd she say to Carly the other day? Like, why are you so bossy?
Yeah. Then like Carly's like, and then like it's just so funny how like they'll like start arguing with like a 4-year-old and like sisters. We don't have it with brothers. No, we just fight.
Yeah, you physically fight.
We physically fight.
Yeah,
we'll
wrestling. Yeah,
yes.
exactly. No, but yeah, it is hard, right? With the babies, especially as they're getting older, obviously definitely noticing that we have different family dynamics than, like their cousins or some of their friends. Like Camila asks a lot, like, well, why is Fiona the littlest person in her family? And why do her brothers and her sister always live in her house? Right. It's hard to find like age appropriate explanations for that.
Right. And then I think it's even like sometimes it's like when the kids do, like when like Kiara and Mia do go back home to their moms, like sometimes like, they will go back. And like for the most part, we let them kind of like make the decision of like whether or not and things like that. That's a whole nother different dynamic.
Yeah.
But, they will, Kiara's the one that probably goes back the most and things like that. And then, they kind of ask that question of like, but the funny part is that Camila will ask it too, like Kiara, and basically be like, "Oh, so you're going back to your mom's this weekend?"
It's like such an old thing. Like,
yeah,
to ask,
she's
right?
just like, yeah, like what are you gonna do? Like it's just it's odd, but
and I think it's like a little like they kind of have more of an idea with Carly because they know John and Megan.
Right.
And they know their daughter together.
Right.
So there's like they kind of have more of an understanding, like, okay, Carly has two families because they know them and obviously they know us, So I think they kind of have a little bit more of an understanding. But they don't know the girl's mom. So I think it's like they're kind of like, where are you going when you leave here?
Yeah. Just come in and out of my life like this.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, you're right. It's so tough.
It is.
It really is. This is probably like one of the things that probably bother me the most about it. Like in when we think about being a step parent, but then also being a parent because you're trying to do things differently than how you were before, and it's just so tough because you want to be able to just do it like and do it with everybody around it, right? Exactly. Mm-hmm. And it's just sometimes you deal with outside dynamics that it makes it particularly harder and things like that. And I know I can speak for it from like my point of view in the sense of like, dealing with the stressors of like, or like your kids, like when they come back and dealing with, almost like a decompression stage, like in the sense of like, okay, I'm back now. My guard needs to do this. My guard needs to do that. Like in that decompression stage and things like that. And then versus like you can just be a parent and you just want to just love and protect your kids and it be like the same way all the time. And it's just tough. And I think, I think like for friends, like for us, like I feel like when it comes to like trying to schedule things too, like it's hard because we want to include all the siblings. We want them to be all together, but then obviously like they have whole nother life too.
Yeah. And we don't know what that's like, right? Because both our parents stayed married. We don't know that feeling of having to go from house to house and having different rules in both houses, having, they have 4 parents.
Right.
It's
everyone
like,
parents differently.
Yeah.
It's like what may fly in one person's house may not fly in another person's house. And there's so much more. And so it's just kind of like, it's the hard things about it, right? It's the hard things that we don't know what they feel all the time. So I think it's so critical that like, one thing that I love that you implemented was Rosebud Thorn.
Yeah.
Those are huge things. Like those were check-ins that we would have at dinner time, in which, if you guys don't know, Rosebud Thorn is basically Rose is
the best part of your day.
The best part of your day. Your bud is what it is you're looking forward to, and your thorn is what was your bad part of your day. And so everyone will kind of go through this, where everyone has an opportunity to basically say what their Rosebud Thorn was. Sounds obviously something out of a book, and it sounds like something like out of like Lifetime, but it works. And it's great, and it helps your kids just kind of open up about it, and helps that conversation move forward.
Yeah, it's just like instead of being like, "How was school today?" and then you just get good or fine or whatever. They might not elaborate. Some kids elaborate more than others, right? But it is hard because it's like, you want to parent them all the same, and you can't.
Right. Well, that's another thing too that we learned, right? Because obviously, from being young parents, we thought we did it right. Like, and I think as we've gotten older, we've realized that a lot of the ways and how we parented in the beginning, more specifically with our firstborns.
Yeah, 100%.
There's regret that we carry. There's at least I know, like for me, like there's a lot of things that I regret doing or how I parented. And it's something that I say to my kids. I'm like, I was a shitty dad. Like I was not a good dad to you guys. I was the best father I thought I was. I thought I was a great dad.
Yeah.
But the reality of it was that my priorities were all screwed up. I'm thinking that it was presents, like as in like presents over presents. Like I was buying them. Like I felt like they had to have the best of the best of the best. And so I would put myself in like this absolute hole. And then I'm trying to dig myself out. And then I'm like carrying the stress of like, oh, well, we don't have money for the bills. We don't have money for this. And like my complete like mindset was completely trash. And then, when all reality, all he wanted was me. Like all he wanted was just for me to, sit down with them and draw or sit down with them and just watch a movie and just relax with them. And it's just, and then also on top of that, like, I grew up where, if you got out of line, you got a whack.
Yeah.
And
we really, really adamantly disagreed on this prior to having our own kids. Yeah.
I was like,
adamantly.
I know. That was like, but it was hard.
Yeah.
Because I felt it was a necessary evil. Mm-hmm. That's the way how I put it down. It was a necessary evil. We went through things like, I regret spanking my kids. I regret spanking them. I remember the first time I ever disciplined Kiara, it broke my heart. I had tears in my eyes. And because of when I saw her reaction, like, it was like a betrayal. Like, she's looking at me, she's like, how could you do this? Yeah. Like, it was like this shock came over her, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this does not feel right. But it's so programmed into your mind that you're like, and then you say things like, I do this because I love you. And you're not even understanding that, like, you're programming your kid that, like, if someone hits them and says, oh, I'm doing this because I love you, that it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't realize that until I got older. But like I said, it's like one thing, I always talked it out with my kids, but I would hand out a punishment first and then come back with an explanation.
Mm-hmm. My whole thing about it, and what I would say to you is, like, if they're too young to understand that what you're doing is wrong, how can you hit them over it? Right? Like, that just doesn't make sense. And if they're old enough to understand, then why don't you just talk to them? Right?
Right.
And that's kind of like what we've implemented with the younger kids, for sure.
Right. But like I said, it was, to kind of just go back very quickly, like, it was meeting you and you kind of saying that stuff to me, right? And I'll never forget that I disciplined Mia once, and nothing happened. Everything was fine. Then I disciplined her again for the same thing.
Yeah.
And then that's when I realized, I'm like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Like, because she still made the same mistake. And because in her mind, it's like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, to her, she doesn't understand why to not do it. And
exactly.
And it's like, and it still happened. But then I realized that when I actually talked to her, that she was like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, now I understand. Yeah.
Now I understand. And she's made the changes.
Yeah. And
then I'm like, wow. I'm like I had it all. But that was hard for me. Because I remember, like I said, like you, and getting back to what you were saying, like you were like, yeah, we're not going to do that with our kids.
Yeah.
Like, if you do that, you're gonna fight me. Like, and for me, I'm just like, what? Like, and it was so tough for me because I'm like, from my culture, right?
We kind of battled about it.
We battled about it.
Yeah, like long conversations about it.
It was tough. Like, and my heels were dug. Your heels were dug.
Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, I'm not gonna say like I'm gonna like freaking wail on him. I was gonna tell him one tap.
Yeah.
And I'm justifying like striking a child because I felt it's a necessary evil.
The thing is like you only know what you know, right? So
right.
that's,
and I think that's where we've said it's like, well, when you're a young parent, right? The only way like you know that how to parent is based off of like, well, I'm not so bad.
Yeah, I didn't turn out too bad.
Yeah.
Well, except we have to trauma dump all of this in the podcast, so.
Yeah, exactly. Like, here we are freaking, like, unwriting all the wrongs that, like, we have. We're great people.
Just it's kidding. Like, my parents never hit me.
Yeah. Mine did. Yeah.
But for me with Carly, right? Like I didn't spank her or anything. I never hit her, but probably almost equally as bad was I yelled. I was a yeller, and that's something like that we've implemented 100% in our house. Like we do not yell.
Yes.
Because obviously all this research has come out too on like how harmful yelling is to children. It doesn't work. Right. You're just escalating a situation, it's caused issues in Carly and my relationship, and I think just going back to like having the older kids versus having the younger kids, like I can see from her perspective why she would feel like some resentment over how I parented her versus how I parent Camila and Selena.
Big time. I mean,
How could she not?
It's tough, and like that, and that's the thing is like, and I think that's what adds into her not being around as often as we wanted to. That it's like to show her, it's just like we can change, and she's deserving of that, and it was a mistake, and we can right those wrongs,
and I have apologized to her for it,
right.
and explained, like, you know, I don't want to say I didn't know any better, because I did, because at the time when I would yell at her, immediately afterwards I would feel like shit, you know, immediately. So I knew what I was doing wasn't right, but I didn't know how to fix it.
Right.
I did not have the tools at the time. You know,
and it's crazy to think, like, people just think like, oh yeah, just don't yell at them. And I'm like, it's not like the problem is that like these feelings, because you and I would talk about this in the sense of that, like, these feelings would overcome you, and like you just don't know and how to direct them. And it's like, well, how do I basically redirect my discontent or my displeasure? Like, how do I explain to my child this? And it's just, that's been the hardest thing. But I think a lot of that plays into like when we first started dating, we kind of talked about it before in a previous episode. It's like we didn't argue. And, you know, I remember that was probably the biggest thing. I'm like, listen, like when we first got into like our first fights and stuff like that, when we first started dating, I remember just saying to you, I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of, but that was the first time I ever did it where I didn't engage a fight, because it was like one of those things of like, all right, well, I love this person more than having the last word. We remove pride from it. And I think that's, and I feel it's the same way with being a parent, because I think it's so much of the culture of, I'm your dad, I'm your mom,
I'm going to tell you what to do. This is how you need to act.
This is how you need to live your life. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not a person. You're not an individual. Yeah. Like, you're an extension of me. It's like, you're my hand, you're my arm.
It's not true. Then they're their own person.
Right.
They have their own ideas, their own thoughts.
You taught me that.
Yeah.
Like, that was the biggest thing that you taught me, amongst many other things that you've taught me. But, it was realizing, it's like, wow, like, no, they have their own personalities, and like, and then that's where I learned too. It's like, you have to love each one of your kids differently. You can't parent the same way how we parent Camila is going to be different the way how we parent Selena.
Yeah, they're completely different people.
Right. It's just they're going to have different needs, different wants. They're gonna have different love languages. They're going to respond differently to the way how you say this and the way how you say that.
Right. I think like our general parenting philosophy is the same, right? But you have to deal with each kid individually.
Right. You know? Essentially is that figuring out and adapt to them. And that's why it's important to have that open dialogue with your kids. And because the thing is that, especially when they get it as we're learning now, getting into the teenage years, they're evolving every single day. And like they go through different things every single day. Oh, big time.
Right. We especially with the oldest, like we grew up with them. We were, you know, you were 21 having Kiara. I was 22 having Carly, you know. Our relationships didn't work out. Like we were dealing with a lot of our own stuff too, you know, and we've both been to therapy and we've both, you know, worked on it. Still a work in progress with the older kids and how we parent them.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
it really is. I think going back to like the step parenting aspect of it, right, is like, so Mia was only, I think, 5 or 6 when you and I met, you know, and I've always found it easier to parent her, like, if I need to, you know, tell her not to do something or, you know, whatever it is, I've never had an issue doing that with her, whereas I'm very hesitant to do so with Kiara.
Right.
You know, so it's just interesting, like, those dynamics when you're a step parent, like, you're not sure, like, should I say this? Should I not say this? Are they going to go back to their other parent? You know, and for me, like, there have been times that, you know, when I was pregnant with Camila, just to go back a little bit, they lived with us fully for like 6 or 8 weeks, remember? Mm-hmm. I think like their mom's apartment was under construction. They lived with us for like 6 to 8 weeks. So I'm pregnant, you know, they're there, and I'm a natural caretaker. I'm going to mother them. Like I can't.
Yeah, we have pictures of like, you like baking with them from scratch and cooking.
Yeah, like it's just, you know, I'm gonna treat them like they're my kids, you know, just like I would my kids, right? But then, and this is the part of step parenthood that's just so difficult, is like, then, you know, the apartment's ready and boom, back to the old custody schedule. And I'm like, wait a second, like I just was in this parenting these kids for like, you know, this many days in a row, like used to them being here every day, and then their mom wants them back and boom, back to their mom.
Right.
You know? That's so hard. It's still hard. It's still something that I deal with, you know?
I think it's even particularly harder for you at times, and is that because there are instances where you're exemplifying, you're being that example of a mother more than their mother sometimes. And I think that the way how we're internally wired, it's like, well, in a child's eyes, their parent is God, right? But that person, just because they're your parent, that person can be poison for you. And it's one of those things that I think is particularly tough, and I've seen you deal with it, is that, you know, because they're wired to
want their mom,
yeah, that you're like a second-class citizen, like, and they're like, oh yeah, hey, thanks for taking care of me, loving me, nurturing me, taking care of me, doing all this other different stuff,
bringing me to school, packing my lunch, bringing me to school. Like, see you later, though.
Yeah, see you later, sucker.
Yeah,
and it's just like,
I just want to clarify, like, both the girls love me and have never treated me with anything except for love and respect.
Right.
And I don't want to make it seem like that's not the case. I'm very fortunate in that sense.
Right.
Like I've never had to deal with like what I know some stepmoms deal with. Like, you're not my mom. You don't treat, like, you know, that kind of thing. I never have. They're both amazing kids, but it's just my own. And I know that a lot of stepmoms must deal with this. And I'm really interested to hear Megan, Carly's stepmom, her perspective on it.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot. I just know if you're a mom, like at heart, you know, and you love and nurture these kids like they're your own, and then they just go back to, you know, their actual biological parent because that's who they want and that's who they should want, you can't help but feel almost like, oh my God, like, what am I, like, why am I even, like, trying, you know?
It's hard because, like, you know what's funny is that, like, now, like, I'm just kind of talk about my feelings on this right now, is that because, and this is like now, like my wheels are turning, like why I don't feel a certain way about it. And maybe, I don't know whether or not it's because Carly does a great job at, you know, kind of giving us our places and things like that. And there's never any issues. Like, I have no issues with John, like, and he's a great father and stuff like,
yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's no issues in any of that. But I also wonder if a lot of it has to do with the fact of that maybe I don't have those feelings because, like, maybe I didn't have, like, the best of example growing up. And so, therefore, it's like, I don't know. It's like, it's just something that made me question. I have to, like, think about it and, like, recircle back to that, because it's like, obviously talking about it right now, it's like, like, this made me feel a certain way.
I wonder how much of it is just because you're a man. And no, really, because I know, like, in general, I'm not saying all, but women tend to internalize things more. And I think there's just so much culturally with, like, mom guilt.
Right. And
things like that. And I think stepping into a stepfather role, you kind of get like kudos, like good for you. You're taking care of someone else's kid, right? Like, and there's really no beef between like guys generally.
It's true because like I have no problem with their mother's husband and stuff like that. Like he's a great guy. Like him and I like have great conversations and things like that too. So I think you're absolutely right because like, we can like compartmentalize much easier, right? And,
you and John will sit there and at Carly's softball games and shoot the shit and have great conversations and like it's like nothing, it's like nothing. But with moms, and there's a huge like thing like, oh, like, well, you're not my kid's mom, so you better not act like it. I'm the mother. Yeah. Like to stepmothers, Yeah. And I just think that's just part of it.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah. Okay.
We could probably do a whole episode on that dynamic.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, please. Yeah, I think that's probably where it is.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it with Megan.
I was like, I'm still going to think about it. Yeah. Because it really got my wheels spinning. I was just kind of like, like, I have to run it by a few of my buddies that are stepfathers as well. Yeah. Just to kind of be like, get their perspective. Yeah,
and when I have that podcast episode with Megan, I'm so interested to see her feelings, like especially about like the beginning when she first met John and stuff like that, and if she had any of these same kinds of feelings, Right. It's been so long at this point, she's been in Carly's life literally since she was 3. She's probably like, and Carly's 15 now. She doesn't remember.
Without her. She doesn't know life without her.
She doesn't remember. Right. So I think it will be really interesting to kind of further explore this dynamic as we go along.
Absolutely.